Solomon's remarkable sagacity didn't emerge in a vacuum. It was greatly influenced by his mother, Bathsheba, a figure pivotal not only to his reign, but also to his personal development. Her insights and guidance played a crucial role in molding Solomon's character and kingship. However, Bathsheba's story also represents the seed of lust that troubled both Solomon and his father David, illustrating a recurring theme that power and desire can create both kings and turmoil. Solomon was conceived from the relationship between Bathsheba and King David, the brave shepherd who defeated Goliath and whom you have surely heard about. But Solomon's story began marked by a dark secret, the adulterous relationship between King David and Bathsheba, who at the time was married to Uriah the Hittite, a brave soldier in David's army. In a desperate attempt to hide his sin, the king sent Uriah to war, ordering the other soldiers to leave him unprotected on the battlefield. As expected, Uriah met his death in combat. However, God's eyes were not blind to the king's actions. The death of David and Bathsheba's first son was seen as divine judgment, a punishment for the committed adultery. But amidst sadness and repentance, God showed his mercy. He forgave King David, and from that reconciliation, Solomon was born, a peace offering between heaven and earth. The young prince grew up under the tutelage of a wise and enigmatic man, the prophet Nathan. While King David dealt with the affairs of the kingdom, Nathan became Solomon's mentor and guide, shaping his mind and spirit with profound teachings and divine revelations. Nathan, with his penetrating gaze and calm voice, saw an extraordinary destiny in Solomon. Through his eyes, the prophet perceived the spark of wisdom and the promise of greatness that burned in the young prince's heart. But then Nathan began to weave a bold plan. The prophet knew that Solomon was not King David's firstborn, and there were older brothers who might claim the throne. Nathan also harbored a dark secret. He knew the full story of the adultery between David and Bathsheba, Solomon's mother. With cunning and determination, Nathan decided to use this knowledge to his advantage. In private audiences with King David, Nathan began to plant the idea that Solomon was destined to be the heir to the throne. With carefully chosen words and prophetic visions, the prophet convinced the monarch that choosing Solomon was God's will. Hence, bit by bit, David began to see in his younger son the promise of a glorious future. When David fell ill and his death approached, he gathered the necessary strength to reaffirm his decision and name Solomon as his legitimate successor. However, the young Solomon, only 15 years old, knew that his reign was born under the shadow of threat. His father's warning words echoed in his ears, reminding him to be vigilant against potential enemies who might conspire against him. And so, with a resolution that surpassed his age, Solomon embarked on an extensive purge to secure his power. Joab, David's chief general, who had supported Adonijah's claim to the throne, was one of the first victims of the purge. Thus, Solomon made it clear that no one was safe from his ruthless justice. He then eliminated Adonijah, cutting off any possibility of conspiracy against him. But the young king did not stop there. With a strategic vision that surpassed his age, Solomon set out to strengthen the military force of the kingdom and embarked on forging an alliance with the powerful Pharaoh of Egypt. Thus, he took the Pharaoh's daughter as his first wife, thereby sealing a pact that promised to strengthen ties between the two nations. The union with the Egyptian princess, wrapped in silks and exotic jewels, was a success. Unfortunately, Solomon thought that uniting with powerful women from other realms was the fastest way to grow his kingdom. This thought would haunt him later, but on a quiet night, while the young King Solomon lay resting in his bed, he plunged into a deep and revealing dream. In this dream, God appeared before him, and with a resonant voice full of grace, God said to Solomon, "Ask for whatever you want me to give you." Solomon, with a humble heart, aware of the immense responsibility resting on him, responded, "You have shown great kindness to your servant, my father David, because he was faithful to you and righteous and upright in heart. So give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong. For who is able to govern this great people of yours?" Solomon's request pleased the Lord, who recognized the purity of his heart and his desire to rule with wisdom. God replied, "Since you have asked for this, and not for long life or wealth for yourself, nor have asked for the death of your enemies, but for discernment in administering justice, I will do what you have asked. I will give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there will never have been anyone like you, nor will there ever be." Thus, Solomon awoke from his dream, carrying with him the most precious gift a ruler could desire, the wisdom and discernment granted by God himself. This divine encounter marked a turning point in Solomon's life, enabling him to lead his people with justice, compassion, and unparalleled understanding. Solomon's wisdom became legendary, attracting people from all nations who longed to hear his words and learn from his knowledge. As it is written, "All the kings of the earth sought the presence of Solomon to hear the wisdom that God had put in his heart." This wisdom was reflected on a memorable day when two women presented themselves before King Solomon, both claiming to be the mother of the same baby. With tears in their eyes and trembling voices, each narrated her version of the story, clamoring for justice and recognition of her motherhood. The baby, oblivious to the dispute, lay in the arms of one of the women, while the tension in the throne room became palpable. Solomon, with the wisdom God had granted him, listened attentively to both women. Then, with a penetrating gaze and a firm voice, he issued a decree that left everyone present astonished. "Bring me a sword. Cut the living child in two and give half to one and half to the other." A sepulchral silence invaded the room as the attendees held their breath at the king's shocking proposal. Then the true mother of the child, with her heart torn and love overflowing from her being, exclaimed, "Ah, my lord, give her the living child and do not kill it." In contrast, the other woman, with unsettling coldness, accepted the division of the baby. At that moment, Solomon revealed his final verdict: "Give the living child to her and do not kill it. She is his mother." The king's wisdom had triumphed, unmasking the truth and protecting the life of the innocent. The true mother, moved by unconditional love, had preferred to renounce her son rather than see him die, while the impostor had shown her lack of empathy and maternal affection. The news of this extraordinary judgment spread rapidly throughout the kingdom, and the people of Israel were amazed at the divine wisdom that dwelt in their king. As it is written, "All Israel heard of the judgment that the king had rendered, and they feared the king, for they saw that the wisdom of God was in him to administer justice." This episode became a lasting testament to the wisdom and discernment that God had granted Solomon. His ability to administer justice with insight and compassion earned him the respect and admiration of his people, consolidating his reign and leaving a legacy that would transcend generations. Solomon, the man who had built the magnificent temple in Jerusalem to honor the God of Israel, now found himself erecting altars to Ashtoreth, Milcom, and Molech, abominable gods of neighboring nations. Idolatry had taken root in his heart, clouding his judgment and distancing him from the divine wisdom that had once distinguished him. Then the Lord, seeing Solomon's wayward heart, was filled with anger and sadness. He who had been blessed with unmatched wisdom and wealth had turned his back on his commandments and given himself over to the worship of false gods. God, in his righteous indignation, confronted Solomon and warned him of the consequences of his actions. "Since this is your attitude, and you have not kept my covenant and my decrees which I commanded you, I will most certainly tear the kingdom away from you and give it to one of your subordinates." God's warning echoed in Solomon's ears like deafening thunder. The kingdom he had built with such care and wisdom would be divided and given to others after his death. Disobedience and idolatry had sown the seeds of discord and fragmentation in the nation that had once been united under his reign. Solomon, the wise and prosperous king, had succumbed to temptation and strayed from the right path. His example would become a warning for future generations, a reminder that even the wisest and most powerful are not exempt from falling into sin when they turn away from God's precepts. As it is written in Proverbs, one of the books attributed to Solomon, "There is a way that appears to be right, but in the end it leads to death." The consequences of Solomon's idolatry and disobedience did not take long to manifest. Adversaries arose from within and outside his kingdom, seeking to exploit the spiritual weakness of the king for their own ends. Among them, Jeroboam stood out, a servant of Solomon who had been secretly anointed by the prophet Ahijah to rule over 10 tribes of Israel. As it is written, Ahijah said, "Take 10 pieces for yourself, for this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says, See, I am going to tear the kingdom out of Solomon's hand and give you 10 tribes." Jeroboam, aware of his prophetic destiny, rebelled against Solomon and sought the opportunity to snatch the kingdom from him. The wisdom and prosperity that had once characterized Solomon's reign were now threatened by division and discord. However, Solomon, in a moment of clarity and repentance, turned his heart towards God, recognizing the futility of his idolatry and the vanity of his earthly desires. The wise king poured his soul into the book of Ecclesiastes, a poignant testimony to his search for meaning and purpose in life. With words laden with emotion and wisdom, Solomon reflected on the ephemeral nature of human existence. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. Through his writings, the king shared his internal struggles, his disappointments, and his eventual understanding that only in God can true satisfaction and the meaning of life be found. Ecclesiastes became the legacy of Solomon's wisdom, a reminder to future generations that the pursuit of happiness in material things and worldly pleasures is ultimately vain and empty. Only by placing God at the center of our lives can we find the peace and purpose we long for. After a 40-year reign, Solomon, the wise and prosperous king, breathed his last. When Solomon closed his eyes for the last time, he left behind a legacy of splendor and wisdom, but also a kingdom on the brink of fracture. His son Rehoboam ascended to the throne, inheriting a kingdom that already showed signs of fragmentation and discord. The death of Solomon marked the end of an era of unprecedented splendor and wisdom in the history of Israel. However, his legacy would endure through his writings and the lessons his life had taught. Despite his faults and mistakes, Solomon would continue to be remembered as a king whose wisdom and wealth had dazzled the world and whose final repentance had demonstrated the importance of keeping God at the center of our lives. But there is one more surprising detail about Solomon's story that does not come from the Bible, but is a legend that developed in apocryphal texts and writings, like the Testament of Solomon. According to these traditions, Solomon was not only a wise king and a prodigious builder, but also possessed a magical ring known as the Ring of Solomon. This ring was supposedly given to him by the archangel Michael and granted him the power to invoke, control, and banish demons. Solomon used these powers to compel the demons to perform tasks or help in the construction of the Temple of Jerusalem, among other things. These accounts are imbued with symbolism and should be understood within their cultural and religious context. They reflect the interest and fascination with supernatural abilities, attributing to Solomon skills that amplify his already legendary wisdom and power. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more great content. Hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.